Yes, it's true. Bookings have slowed down all over the world, and for good reason, but not for the reason that you think. See, if you talk to Airbnb hosts, every year there always is something amiss. Either whether it's COVID and Airbnb taking your money, or regulations impending doom, or a sudden surge of party guests using the Airbnb platform to throw parties and, of course, causing more regulations. There is legitimately always something amiss, and Airbnb has recently gone public, causing a flow of changes that a lot of hosts aren't happy with, including the new 72-hour rule, where a guest can make a complaint that something is wrong within 72 hours instead of within 24. That is a legitimate issue. Airbnb has done all sorts of things to change how they operate and how they capture new customers, but what you think is causing your summer slowdown is not because of the change that you think that Airbnb has made. Let me tell you what Airbnb has done most recently with their platform change, how it intends to affect the space, what it's actually doing, and where your slow bookings are coming from. My name's Sean Rakijic. I am a business owner with 7 years of Airbnb experience. This is not my only business, so I'm going to dip into my bag of economics and help you understand your hospitality business from a new light in this video. Let's jump in. Welcome back, family. Now, this is a hot take, slightly controversial topic. Airbnb didn't change their algorithm and dunk on you. Your listing isn't because Airbnb has changed its loyalties or its priorities and now you're suddenly underperforming because Airbnb threw you a curveball. That is actually not what is going on. But there is a potential instance of change that Airbnb has made that is affecting you, but it's inadvertent and it's not because of the algorithm change itself, because that's not what's happening. Let's first talk about the change that they did make. If you look at the platform, the whole front end is different, and this is legitimate, but it affects your business far less than you think it does, and I'll tell you why. Airbnb's landing page, if you go to airbnb.com, it's now pushing you towards unique stays. Really cool architecture, tiny homes, tree houses, things like that. And if you've never traveled on Airbnb, this is going to influence your perception of their brand, right? What is Airbnb giving you? What does Airbnb do? What's listed on Airbnb? That first impression will make a lasting first impression. And that's really what they want from all their new user experience. Now, anybody who's used Airbnb 5 or more times probably has formed into some form of habit with how they use Airbnb. So they'd load the Airbnb platform, go, oh wow, this front end's new, and they would think nothing else of it, and then they go type in whatever city they want to travel to, and then they start to book. Now, this is very important for you to understand, and why they're doing this is also just as important. So Airbnb's front end is trying to change perception for people who do not know Airbnb yet, because Airbnb is still adopting new users, and they're trying to differentiate from other online travel agencies, and that's what they are, is they help you travel. VRBO and Booking.com and TripAdvisor are all other places that you could go. Even Priceline is in a way a unique travel agency, even though it's owned by Booking.com. Same way that like HomeAway is owned by VRBO and things like that. When a new user hits the platform on either of these websites, whatever they see first becomes that lasting impression, and Airbnb is trying to differentiate from VRBO and Booking.com because honestly, VRBO's done a really good job of taking their lunch lately. They have tons of marketing campaigns out there, advertisements everywhere, promotions with influencers like myself. I have a marketing agreement with VRBO, and you can actually click the link below, join VRBO, and I get paid, for example. There are elements at play here where VRBO's playing a really aggressive game trying to steal business from Airbnb. It's not because of that only that people are going to VRBO. One of the reasons why people are leaving Airbnb is because of bad user experience. Both hosts and guests are not happy with decisions that have been made by Airbnb in past, and just that's what happens when you're the market leader, right? You're the biggest name in the game, people go to you first, and if you're not ready for that business, you make mistakes. Well, Airbnb's made some mistakes on both sides of the fence, and now people are going to new channels like VRBO, Booking.com, or elsewhere because they like houses or apartments instead of hotels. They just didn't like their experience with that one provider, and they're hoping to get a new experience somewhere else. But alas, here we are, same hosts, just multi-platform. So that's really not going to be the biggest change here, but if VRBO can somehow win the trust of the user through other means, or Booking.com can through other means, then they're going to keep that business. So Airbnb is trying to generate new business with customers that VRBO or Booking.com can't take from them. They're trying to insulate themselves into this unique space curation. It's something that these other websites don't do. They don't have a curated space for tiny homes or tree houses or really cool architecture. This will give Airbnb more longevity if it works. You may think that what was built here will actually compete with your current business, but it really doesn't. Anybody who's new to Airbnb, they'll go onto that website and be really enamored with what they find, and they may be more likely to book a unique space instead of a practical space. But anybody who gets on Airbnb to go to an urban market, for example, or to go to something that they already booked, they're still just gonna be going right into the search bar and searching for stuff. So that takes us to step 2 in the change. When you do search for stuff, Airbnb's made some minor changes. What they've done is they've taken the title away. The title still matters for Google ranking. If your title is like SEO loaded enough, your Airbnb listing can still show up on Google if somebody searches for a hotel or a place to stay in your city. So your title still does matter, but the fact that it says king bed no longer pops up, which really does affect one of my favorite things to do, which is that if you have a king bed, put it in your title. Or if you have free coffee or free anything, put it in your title. This no longer matters the way that it used to because you no longer see the title right away. So it's not going to generate you clicks. Now, it's not completely irrelevant because when somebody does click on your listing, they then do see your title. So putting SEO gibberish in your title is really not going to do well for that user experience. When they click on your listing, it still needs to be some coherent sentence that still reinforces confidence in your listing. But putting king bed in the title no longer will do the trick. So what you could do is you could actually make like a little bubble tag. You know how Airbnb puts a little bubble tag over a photo that says superhost or rare find, things like that. Make a bubble tag of your own, put it on a different part of the photo. So if you're superhost, the superhost bubble tag doesn't cover this up, but you could put king bed on a bubble tag on your image. And so by doing this, as people are going and scrolling through photos or scrolling through listings, they'll see that you have a king bed because you put it on your hero photo. It's no longer gonna be showing in your title, but you can put a little bubble tag that looks kind of Airbnb branded, so people just assume that Airbnb is the one telling them that there's a king bed. Now this is a workaround, okay? So take that one and use it, and this will help you with your click-through. And of course, click-through is super, super important. This one change could influence the number of clicks that you're getting, and the number of clicks that you're getting could influence your ranking on Airbnb's interest algorithm. The most important thing to note here is that Airbnb is still using the same interest algorithm that they've always been using. And so this change to the front end platform isn't some kiss of death to all of your guys' listings. What I really think it is that there was a legitimate change in travel spend. And a lot of the listings that are seeing a drop in travel spend are listings that are on the higher end of the price point for the markets. So if you're a richly priced Airbnb, because you saw that people are spending more and more money like for COVID and your prices have come up, well, your prices need to come back down. That's it. You need to correct back for the market. And because of how far in advance people travel, if you're a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom house, you're going to see that the lead time on this is pretty important. Like people normally book 6, 8, 12, 14 weeks out for like bigger group trips. Now, a lot of these people can cancel without penalty more than 30 days away, according to Airbnb's, even their strict cancellation policy. If it's more than 30 days in the future, they can cancel and get a refund. So these bigger groups that are booking farther in advance still have room to cancel their trips, and you can see it in the news that people are canceling their trips at a pretty high rate because of inflation. Now, people still do intend to travel, but they're going to travel different. So if your listing was expensive and they canceled, then you're going to see those issues. Now, if you're not getting bookings, it's because your listing was small enough or the lead time was short enough that after inflation started to affect people's travel spend, you didn't have your bookings yet anyway, and now you're just not getting them, which means you need to react by repricing your listing. You can also reach out to previous guests who have stayed with you last year and say, hey, if you're planning on traveling again this year, I'll give you a great rate to book direct. I just met Mark from Boostly at an event I spoke at last week, and Mark's got a bunch of really cool tricks for getting direct bookings, and going multi-platform and getting direct bookings is really your biggest solution at this point. When I was speaking at this event, I gave people a little window into my booking calendar, and a lot of our Dallas properties are booked on VRBO. And we're talking apartments, 1-bedroom, studios, maybe some 2-bedroom apartments. These are booked on VRBO, which is actually pretty rare. Normally, VRBO's been known to have bookings for just rural vacation homes. Well, VRBO's really been pushing into these cities, and they're paying us a good amount of money for our Dallas properties. Maybe nearly 50% of our bookings in Dallas-Fort Worth are coming from VRBO, which is completely uncharacteristic compared to last year or any of the years before. And that's what's important to know here. See, there's a slowdown on Airbnb, but it's a combination of things. The current inflation market, fear of recession, possible recession right now, depending on when you see this video, uncertainty with other things causing people not to want to travel, and then people being kind of fed up with Airbnb's fee structure, with their experience with their hosts, just all sorts of stuff. All these things are causing people to not book on Airbnb specifically or not book at all, but then some of those people are migrating to other channels like VRBO. VRBO is really the next best choice if you're going to be booking a house or an apartment for short-term rentals. They're just the next most user-friendly / widely distributed one out there. Booking.com is up there, but I really don't like them. I really don't think that their experience is very good, and they give too much of that hotel vibe. So people who don't like hotels, even though there's houses on Booking.com, I think they just get too much of that hotelish feel on Booking.com, and that's probably the curse that Booking.com's got to carry with them moving forward. And one addition, it's rare, but in some cities there is an oversupply. We've been tracking Houston for some time now, and Houston has more listings currently than there were listings in existence pre-COVID. Most cities in the United States had a certain number of listings, and then when COVID hit, they started to taper off. March, April, May, June, it just dropped off, and listing count dropped by like half or more than half. So for example, Austin has just over half the listings that they used to have, just over half. And revenues are up in Austin by 400%. So the spend is up 400% on short-term rentals. That's huge. Well, in Houston, spend is roughly the same and supply is roughly the same than pre-COVID. So they're not seeing really any special advantages. And if you kind of look at those numbers and the way that those numbers are tracking, the rate of growth on listings was like growing at some neck break speed while revenues were not. So projecting, how things are going to go in Houston for a while, I think the next 2, 3, 4 months are still going to suck. But what'll happen is a lot of hosts will flush out of the market, dropping supply, and then price per night will start to go back up as there's less properties available for people to stay in. That's just kind of the natural cycle of a peer-to-peer service like this. If there's too many providers, price goes down. If there's not enough providers, price goes up. And it will always fluctuate like that in waves. Certain areas are more predisposed to that, like urban areas. It's much more possible for a bunch of people to jump in, especially if there's no regulations. And Houston is one of the least regulated cities for short-term rentals on the market, and that will cause this wave effect. Now, there have been times when the money was really good in a place like Houston. There's times where the money isn't. And those who have lower cost bases, and I preach this all the time, if you have your own housekeepers, you have your own customer service staff, you're doing all of your own management, no cleaning companies, no co-hosts, you're buying down your internal costs by owning your own staff, by running your own teams and cutting out all that external fat. Your cost basis will be lower per reservation, which means you'll achieve profit faster. And if there is a down market, like some of you are going through, you're more lean and your competitors will go out of business and you'll stay in business. And the other aspect of this is proper dynamic pricing. A lot of people use a set it and forget it method. And those of you who are using Wheelhouse, Beyond, Price Labs, and if you guys aren't really actively watching your pricing machine, then you're actually doing a disservice to your business. Even if you have a dynamic pricing algorithm that is moving in ranges that are optimal for the most part, whenever you hit anomaly markets like this where things are happening that are unprecedented, AI can't do that for you. And I would argue that these algorithms, Wheelhouse, Price Labs, Beyond Pricing, I won't even call them AI quite yet. They're just algorithms. So they're not even learning fast enough to make the adjustments that are necessary right now. They're reading and responding to levers that they're pre-designed to respond to like an algorithm should, but they're not making key adjustments for anomalies. Your brain has to do that. So I'm in my listings every now and then taking a look at our prices. And my team has a revenue management strategy that I teach them. But if anything were ever to break, like all the way break, I would jump back into my business and run it if I had to. I'm fortunately fully automated, like 0 hours a week. We're growing to about 170 listings now. We got a bunch of leases in queue. So we're growing, but I'm not working in the business or even on the business anymore. I'm working on other stuff. But if something went really, really bad, I don't have too much pride to jump back in and save it. And in your case, you guys need to be closer to the mechanisms, especially if you don't have a really robust pricing management strategy that accounts for these types of occupancy ranges that you're seeing now. If you're super under occupied, then you do need to make some very key changes to your base prices and how you're behaving on weekdays and what kind of discounts you're giving for the stays. You should be optimizing all these things and trying to get a bunch of bookings to catch back up to your normal healthy ranges. This introduces a concept that hotels will call PACE, which is how much new revenue in bookings are you getting every single week. It's like a cadence, it's like a drumbeat. A hotel maybe might want to see $50,000 or $100,000 a week in new bookings every week, right? Some of those bookings are 2 months in advance, some of those bookings are today or tomorrow, but they're seeing on average $100,000 of revenue generated in booking activity every week, and that's their pace. So you're seeing that your pace is dropping, and you need to look at your lead time and the relationship with that. If your average booking is 6 weeks or 10 weeks in the future, but then your pace is dropping, then you need to reprice to start picking up more bookings based on where the optimal window of your customer is. So you need to be changing your prices that are a month from now, because that's where people should be doing the booking. Now, if there's a change in travel behavior and people start to book more last minute, you might find that you're dropping your prices today for the future of 2 weeks to 6 weeks out, But then there's a ton of last minute booking activity, so you actually raise your rates back up last minute because the amount of demand for last minute travel when people finally figure their lives out starts to pick up again. This is a behavior change that might lead to either the same amount of money or more money down the road, but for now, it just looks scary because your lead time is so far in advance. But like with hotels or studio apartments or one bedrooms, what we call the lead time, how far in advance these people are booking, can be very last minute anyway. If our pace starts to drop, we just get a little bit more aggressive with our very last minute prices, like today, tomorrow, the next day. If you don't have any bookings for tomorrow or the next day or the next day and you're a big listing, that's a huge problem. If you don't have any bookings for tomorrow and you're a studio, that's not as much of a problem. As long as you know how to manage your prices and your pace, you can survive that. It's gonna take you some research. If this is your first time hearing about things like pace, dynamic pricing, lead time, I have a whole playlist on this YouTube channel on pricing strategy, and I really urge you to catch up on this kind of stuff. If this stuff kind of makes your head spin or you're a little bit intimidated by this, and you've been in the industry for a while, well, then this is your wake-up call that you've been running your business like it's a real estate investment and just been trying to be on passive easy mode this whole time when you should not have been. The day that you're in Airbnb, short-term rentals, VRBO, the day you're in the space is the day that you're a hospitality business owner. You are a provider of short-term lodging. You are not a real estate investor anymore when you're operating your business. You can take that hat, take it off, and then go and like look at your computer and go shop around for properties if you're buying and be a real estate investor. But the moment you move that real estate into here, into the space, into our world, that's not real estate anymore, that's hospitality. So if you are afraid of these topics, then you need to find somebody who isn't, and that will cost you money. And it's one of the things that I don't want you to do is spend money on a co-host. So you might need to find a business partner or hire a manager, but pay them a salary. So you need more listings. You need scale to do this. You need 10, 15 houses, and then pay somebody a salary. Pay them a cushy $70, $80, $90,000 a year to run your business for you, dynamic pricing, customer retention, customer service, managing housekeepers. But the money you save from hiring your own housekeepers will pay that person's $90,000 a year salary anyway, and life becomes really good. That is a way to get this done if you are needing to break into owning your own staff. I really urge you never to use a co-host and never to use third-party housekeeping companies, especially if you want to survive in this industry. You need to really think about this as a business and get there. And that's what I've been teaching for the last 5 years, guys. We are automating the business by owning the people that work for us, owning the systems. They are proprietary. And if you think about it too, how many housekeepers have you used that didn't do a good job because they did not understand your property, right? In-housing, so that way you can give a very specific cleaning system to a housekeeper that they repeat over time. And you can even teach them some like tips and tricks that other hosts don't know. And that becomes an advantage for you because other hosts can't do stuff that you can do, then your product is better. So you can't do that unless you own your own housekeepers, because otherwise you're gonna train a housekeeper to go clean your competitor's house. And that's not what you want. In recap, if you're experiencing a drop in bookings, it's likely due to uncertainty with the economy, people's fear with inflation, people deciding to save money, lower their budget for travel, changing the nature of where they're going to be traveling instead. If you're in a particularly expensive location, people are going to go to less expensive locations to travel, and you need to start adjusting things like your pace, your prices, and stuff like that. And there are a couple changes you can make to your listing based on what Airbnb did change, but don't have the sky is falling, Airbnb changed the algorithm, I'm doomed thing. Everybody else is going through all of this. And at worst, the very worst thing that maybe possibly has happened is where an Airbnb did make these changes, they may have done a soft reset on people's listings, right? So the way Airbnb's interest algorithm works is everybody gets a 1 month boost, and then from there they start tracking data. How many views are you getting? What percentage of occupancy are you getting? There's a velocity or momentum metrics here that really imply interest. If people are viewing your listing, hanging out on your listing for a while, engaging with it, sending you messages, booking your place and your calendars filling up, all that stuff implies that your place is interesting. And that stuff matters until you start to get reviews and reviews and reviews and all this other stuff. Well, they might have done a soft reset and wiped your guys' momentum metrics from the algorithm, and now your listing has to repopulate the interest part of it. You obviously still have all of your own reviews. They might have actually changed the weight at which they are looking at reviews. They may not be giving as much seniority to the oldest listings, or they may be giving more seniority to the oldest listings that have more and more reviews. They might be doing something like that. It could be a small change. At worst, there's probably a shakeout period where now that Airbnb's updated, they might have wiped some of the temporary data that gets tracked. Like for example, when you wish list somebody's place, that is temporary interest, because the rate at which you get wish listed, it's like kind of like how many wish lists per day is this person getting. That is an interest metric, not how many total wish lists you have, but your wish lists in real time is a temporary metric. And so you might have like put your listing in a wish list group and everybody already wish listed it. Now you can't do it again. You've already wasted all those wish lists. So now you can't go and jam artificial like interest into your listing. If you are suffering from a lack of boost and you've never been in a wish list group, you might as well go on Airbnb and find wish list groups. Please don't go to the hosts of Airbnb Automated, my Facebook group, and post your listing and say, can everybody please heart this? Because that's not what that group is for. That group is for education. It's for camaraderie. It's for sharing experiences and sharing ideas. There are wish list groups on Facebook dedicated for you posting your listing and everybody wish lists it and you go tit for tat. There are places like that for it. And this will only work now if you've never done it before. If you've already tapped out all those groups, you're now stuck. There's no one else to wish list your place. And if all those likes are old, they no longer count. Food for thought, guys. Understand the algorithm and the algorithm will reward you. Thank you so much again for being here, being part of my YouTube family. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.